Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're unpacking something literally profound, an ancient Sanskrit text that gets right down to the very roots of self-realization, the Supreme State, decoding Katha Upanishad 2.3.10. If you've been looking for a structured, deeply logical framework of how consciousness actually works, you're going to absolutely love this. Let's decode exactly how ancient thinkers mapped out the absolute highest states of the human mind. Okay, let's dive into this with pretty much the ultimate existential question. How do you transcend mortal limitations? I mean, it's a massive question, right? It's the engine driving all philosophical inquiry. But what we're exploring today isn't just some abstract philosophical musing. It's a direct, concrete answer, pulled straight from one of the most foundational verses in all of Vedic literature.
But to really grasp the answer, we first need to set the scene. On one side of this ancient conversation, you've got Nachiketa. He's this young, intensely curious seeker who essentially represents our burning human desire to know the ultimate truth. And on the other side, his teacher is Lord Yama, the deity of death himself. Just think about the sheer drama of that dynamic for a second. This isn't a casual fireside chat. This is a young boy literally staring death in the face, demanding to know the ultimate secrets of the universe and how to transcend the very mortality that Yama represents.
And you know what makes this text so brilliant? It's Yama's response. Lord Yama doesn't just hand Nachiketa some abstract theology or vague poetic ideas. No, Katha Upanishad 2.3.10 is essentially a secret formula. It gives us a concrete step-by-step mechanism for experiencing ultimate truth. It is a highly structured, totally systemic approach to mastering the human mind. Let's actually look at the exact translation of that formula. I'm going to read this slowly, so let the immense gravity of these words just sink in. When the five senses, which are the organs of knowledge, come to rest along with the mind, and the intellect does not waver, that, they say, is the supreme state, paramagati. Notice how remarkably specific that is? It's not about actively doing something in the external world. It's all about a very specific sequence of internal settling. Let's clearly define that end goal, paramagati. Translated, it means the supreme state, or the absolute highest spiritual liberation. But the key phrase you really want to focus on here is unbroken equilibrium. That is the ultimate destination of the seeker's journey. It's a profound state where all the different noisy layers of your mental activity aren't fighting each other or reacting to the outside world anymore. Instead, they've completely settled into a perfect, undisturbed balance. Now, what's really fascinating about this descent inward is how Yama actually breaks down the mechanics of achieving that unbroken equilibrium. He outlines a direct, sequential, three-tier quietude. Basically, you can't just skip ahead and jump to the finish line. You have to move through these very specific layers of human perception and cognition. So let's walk through this descent step by step and notice how the power of three is heavily emphasized here. Step one begins right at the outermost layer of our interaction with the world, the senses, or jnanani. They have to draw inward. Once that happens, we unlock step two, the mind, or manas, which must become completely still. And finally, only when the mind is fully still do we reach step three, the deepest layer of all, the intellect, or buddhi, which must stop its constant oscillation. Just to ensure absolute clarity on how deep this internal quietude actually goes, let's look at the mechanics. For the senses, it means they completely cease their outward distraction. Sight, hearing, smell, taste, touch, they literally stop feeding on external objects. Then, because the senses aren't frantically feeding it new data anymore, the mind stops its usual habit of processing and reacting. It aligns completely with those resting senses. Finally, at the very deepest level, your discriminating intellect stops overanalyzing, judging, and doubting. The whole shebang just stops. And this brilliantly illustrates the sheer, mind-blowing contrast between how we normally live and the supreme state. Think about our normal mortal state for a second. Our senses are constantly hijacked by screens, notifications, and noises, right? Our minds are endlessly reacting to that flood of data. We're stressed, we're excited, we're overwhelmed. And our intellects are just constantly churning, doubting, overthinking every single choice. Now contrast that chaotic mess with paramagati. Senses at rest, mind still, intellect absolutely unwavering. It is literally the absolute antithesis of our highly stimulated everyday existence.
Now, this supreme quietude we've just mapped out actually has a massive historical legacy. It builds into something truly foundational for Eastern philosophy. Because in the very next verse of the Katha Upanishad, verse 2.3.11, this exact state is given a name, and it's a name that is recognized all over the world today. That name is yoga. The verse says, "This firm control of the senses is what wise men call yoga." Guys, this is huge. What you are looking at right here is one of the earliest classical definitions of yoga in all of Vedic literature. When we hear the word yoga today, it's so easy to immediately picture physical postures, stretching in a boutique studio. But this text proves that at its ancient root, the practice is fundamentally about this profound, three-tiered internal stillness and firm sensory control. And this ancient conversation between a boy and the deity of death didn't just stay buried in the Upanishads either. This exact passage directly laid the philosophical groundwork for what is arguably one of the most famous texts in the history of mindfulness and spirituality, Patanjali's Yoga Sutras. Patanjali basically took this exact concept of mental equilibrium and formalized it for all future generations.
So the crucial point is perfectly captured in Patanjali's most famous definition, Yogas Chitta Vritti Nirodhaha, which translates to, yoga is the cessation of the fluctuations of the mind. You can draw a direct, incredibly straight line from Lord Yama's teaching of the mind and intellect coming to rest, straight to Patanjali's concept of stopping the mind's fluctuations. It is the exact same pursuit, the pursuit of Paramagati, the supreme state.
Which brings us to a crucial question I really want to leave you with today. Amidst the endless distractions of the modern world, how often does your own intellect waver? We live in an era where our senses are relentlessly fed external objects, causing our minds to constantly react and our intellects to endlessly oscillate. But the ancient wisdom of Nachiketa and Lord Yama reminds us that transcending these mortal limitations isn't about doing more. It's about a structured, deliberate descent into inward stillness. Thank you so much for joining me to explore this fascinating text today. Keep seeking, keep learning, and I'll catch you in the next explainer.